Broadcasting under the night sky from the edge of an undisclosed jungle on the Gulf of Mexico, I'm Christopher Garetano, your voice in the night. For the next hour, allow me to be your guide into the bizarre unknown, the fantastic macabre, and together we'll journey to that borderland between fiction and reality, a place beyond all rational explanation. We are now off to the witch.
You feel like a leaf at the mercy of the wind, don't you? Since the day you were born, one way or another, someone has been doing something to you. And they've been doing something to you against your will. But now you're feeling helpless, like a leaf in the wind. I'm a warrior. A warrior would rather be defeated and die than act against his nature. That is the path you've chosen to take, whether you know it or not. You should assume full responsibility.
Responsibility for what?
Responsibility for everything. Everything in your world.
That was a scene from the 1986 motion picture Poltergeist, The Other Side. In this scene, the late Will Sampson, who was also a consultant on the movie, and of Muskogee Nation heritage, plays Taylor, a spiritual medicine man attempting to save Stephen Freeling and his family from a sinister, evil force. Taylor offers strength in the form of his native spiritual teachings to help battle the monster within and at his doorstep. Tonight's guest is a living example of Will Sampson's Taylor character, as all of the philosophies in the Poltergeist sequel were based on very real indigenous folklore and spiritual practices. We'll hear his amazing story after this commercial break.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
You are listening to the Off to the Witch podcast, where we explore that bizarre borderline between fiction and reality and all subjects arcane. Journey over to my YouTube channel and subscribe now at youtube.com/@offtothewitch for a variety of extras and special features, including the Off to the Witch mini docs with further insights on many of the latest episodes, as well as previews and behind the scenes of my forthcoming investigative series, Off to the Witch Presents, as well as the anniversary edition of my motion picture documentary, Montauk Chronicles. And follow us on social media. All links are available at linktree.com/Garetano7, Garetano7, and stay tuned for more Off to the Witch.
They're back.
You are gonna die!
Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, rated PG-13. Starts Friday, May 23rd.
Welcome back to Off to the Witch. I'm your host, Christopher Garetano, and tonight's guest, Quese IMC, is a spiritual practitioner of Pawnee and Seminole ancestry. He's investigated a variety of haunted and demonically charged locations, and also has a keen awareness of influences from beyond. So here's my interview with Quese IMC.
Well, usually, how I usually begin in regards to anything that I share, I usually start with a song, like a traditional song from our people. And a lot of times we share these songs for prayer, for acknowledgement to our ancestors, our ancestral beings, star people, all those that look down upon us and help us, guide us, the animal powers. For me, I sing, these certain songs to guide me in my words, to protect me in the things that I share, and also to open up doors, spiritual doorways, and that's how I start, and that's how I'm going to start right now. I like to say Noah, Akitaro, Hikshte, Stongo, to Estajari, Stahaki, Estalusty, to all people out there. Magazi Kachahaki Jaho Jefkiros. Magazi Marcus. My name is Marcus. I am a Skeety Pawnee, Wolf Pawnee, and a Chawi Pawnee. Also, I'm a Nugazalgi Bear Clan of the Seminole people. Those are my two tribes. And I grew up in Oklahoma. I grew up around a lot of the elders of that time. Some would say they're the last elders of a time of ones that grew up around the old ones who either were born free, or born during the first years of the reservation, prison camps, occupation of our people. And growing up, I always knew that it was a supernatural, spiritual world moving about me, something I never really could put an understanding to it aside from knowing that it was just the way it was. It was the way of life. To be around an upbringing of spirituality that either translated through our cultural dances, songs, ceremonies, or translated through visions, spiritual encounters, mysterious visitors from, some would say, the Awahaksu, Kojachumba, high up in the sky. Some would say star people. Many different things that I would say help raise a young Indian child in this world is that spiritual connection to different beings. And that's how I grew up. It wasn't something that I shared aside or outside of my family, or close spiritual people that were close to me, but it's something that I experienced. And they say as natives, we live in 3-4 worlds here. We live in our world, our Indian world here that we've made in this time. We live in the white man's world. We live in a spiritual world, a supernatural world. And then we live in the world where we try to balance the two to understand that we're just spiritual beings on a human journey navigating this world. And as we navigate this world, we realize that it's not just our spiritual experiences or understandings of the supernatural or things that we know to be true in the paranormal, in the supernatural, in the spiritual, but how those things have also translated into modern day society with all people, causing people to have imbalance, causing people to see things, experience things. And they say those things would happen to all people on the earth whenever we are in a time of prophecy. And so as I grew, I learned these things. And growing up in Oklahoma, that's how I was raised, in a spiritual indigenous world and a modern day urban societal world. And so here I am. And my name is Marcus. One of the first things I remember, I would say maybe two things that I remember, as a kid, maybe 3 years old, is I used to get visited, by these some people will call them spirit helpers, ancestors. Some people would say that's ghosts. And religious people would probably say, that's evil, you know. But to me, as a child, seeing these beings come, they would visit with me. They would talk to me. They would tell me things. They would tell me stories, and I remember these stories were were spiritual in nature, and I remember having an understanding of what a spirit was at that young age. And also at that time, I remember having really deep visions and dreams of going back in time. Um, Also, even going back to the time of Jesus, even going back to early creation of when certain things were formed in this world, whether that's thousands and thousands of years ago. But in these spiritual dreams, I was able to travel to certain places and see things. As a child, not really understanding them, but as I grew older, it was when I really understood what they were showing me at a young age. And I was told that those star people, which are the ancient beings that are so holy that they never came to Earth, they just stretched to Earth. They say that when those star beings or those ancient beings choose people, they mark them at a young age. And a lot of times when those star people are chosen, their life is filled with a lot of hardships, loneliness. And the reason they say that is because those journeys are some of the loneliest journeys that a person could travel. And that's why they say a lot of people who are chosen at young ages don't make it because of the hardships, because of trying to live in this world, um, as I guess you could say as a human, or live in this world and and truly understand the pain and the human suffering of all those things around you that some would say are burdens or weights upon the back of those people. And so that's why you see a lot of people who were chosen that they have hardships or they don't make it. And so, for me, as a young child, seeing and experiencing these things made sense as I got older. And when they really made sense is whenever my son experienced them as well, and I was able to show him, help him, and guide him for the things that he was experiencing and he was seeing, which is the beautiful part of spiritual gifts because you get to see them pass through the genetic code, pass through the spiritual makeup of who we are. And that's the exciting part of spirituality, is that it carries on through the hardships, through the pains of everything that our ancestors went through. It was our spirit that carried us through. Even though we went through so much loss and pain, we're still here because of that spirit. And that's why I tell these stories of the spirits, ancestors, supernatural and spirituality, folklore, and even scary Indian stories of our people.
When you were a child, did you feel innately that you had all of that in you? It was almost an understanding before it was articulated in terms of academia or anything like that. Even if it was explained to you by an elder, do you feel you just kind of inherently understood it as a kid? Just like you were saying, our ancestors are attached to that genetic code. Did you feel it when you were a kid?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was a kid, I felt I understood it. I knew exactly what it was. I could understand the language. And whenever they would communicate in different languages. And I would say different languages, I mean different tones. Certain ones from certain areas sounded different, but I was able to differentiate those and understand that certain ones had certain abilities, and I was able to know how to utilize those in my own life. Um, but it's like in life, you some things are for this and some things are for that, and you don't mix them. And that's the human battle. That's the human journey. And so when I was young, I understood it well. But the world is what can corrupt, those things. And when you see those things corrupted all around you, you realize that there's a massive spiritual battle taking place in the supernatural in this world.
And I definitely want to talk about all of that, especially there's some heavy stuff happening right now, disruption. And I want to get to that a little bit later in the conversation. But if we can go back, um, and you were telling me what it was like as a kid, can you bring me to a specific memory that you have that that you may have seen something that revealed to you there was more to this world or there was another world, even though if it was told to you since birth? What was the first time you actually saw it with your own eyes or your perception?
I would say growing up, being able to travel, you know, spiritually travel, you could call it astral project, but to go different places and to see things that were happening, um, being able to communicate, as a kid with um, spirits. But as a kid, you just thought they were people, but they look different. They, of course, they were dressed in an older type of attire, and they were in spiritual realms. How I can translate that. Um, but growing up, I just remember being able to go into the earth, go deep into the waters, and to go deep into space. Um, as a kid, I thought everybody could do that. I thought everybody dreamt like that or had visions like that or was able to communicate like that. But when I went, I was invited. I was brought in, and what's interesting about it is before I knew these things, these are things that were a part of our ancient stories of our people, of things that they were able to do to communicate with higher powers. For me, it all made sense. It all made sense. But growing up where I grew up, in a small city, you try to navigate this world and that world, and and that was not necessarily a challenge until it became an obstacle of for me in regards to a belief system between spirituality and church.
You heard stories as a kid. I'm sure there were stories being told by elders, by older people in the family. Um, when was the first time you can recall? And these are unique ghost stories too, right? To your culture, the culture you grew up with, and probably what a lot of people outside of it are not really privy to outside of the European perspective, where they're treading on ground that's sacred. They disturbed something. It's traditionally now, I don't like a lot of horror stories and Stephen King novels. That's their perspective. That's the European perspective coming here. What's the reverse, the inverse of that? Because I definitely want to hear as much of that as possible because they are lesser told. Those stories are lesser told for sure.
Well, usually what it is a lot of times when there's like ghosts around a place or a house and people are disturbed, people are sick, they're unsettled, they get nauseated, they get headaches. It's because something bad happened there. Something bad happened there from somebody that was a human, lived maybe 100 years ago, 150 years ago, 50 years ago. Now those people that committed that crime or did something bad, they were disturbed in their mind, maybe because within their bloodline, some of their ancestors did something bad, and so that bad uh, attracted negative energy, and so these people lived a life that was dark. So when they live in that dark energy, they anywhere they go, they're going to disturb something that is positive, something that is sacred and holy. So some of these dark people that walk this earth that have that dark energy, they go to a holy place. They go to a house that was built on a holy ground, and those two energies are going to conflict. They're going to resist each other. And when they resist each other after a long period of time, that person that's alive becomes even more sick mentally. And so that when that happens, dark energies swoop in and they feed off that person's mind, and they make for them to do something dark, evil, a killing or something like that. And so they do that, and it causes more negative energy, and next thing you know, there's a haunting on top of a haunting, and so those places just become trapped with that negative energy. But below all of that, it was all built on a holy site or a sacred site. And so whenever I've been to certain places like that, I'm able to see like what happened, uh, what atrocity happened, or what murder may have happened in that location. And when you go deeper than that, you can literally clear it or clean it, or allow for those negative spirits to move on, to go from these places. In certain places, some places are just dark, but I think a lot of people don't realize that, like when they're walking or treading on sacred and holy ground, that whenever you walk in a negative or dark way, it's only a matter of time before those energies conflict, and that person could be sucked into like a hole of sickness, to where they themselves could become haunted, or they themselves could become affected, and things might not go well for them, and they may make bad decisions, and bad things will cycle out of control. And that's what essentially is going on all over the world, and that's why they say, this land is holy and sacred, and things can be done to rebalance it, but a lot of times they're not being done, and that's why there's a lot of hauntings and dark things happening all over.
I had read somewhere that, the United States itself is essentially one big burial ground, and it's also disturbed because there's just so much history here, and so many people populated the area. But my other question is, because you were mentioning this, like some of these dark energies, do you believe that they're, ancient? Do you believe they're ancient from basically the dawn of time? They've always been here. Maybe not from discorporated human beings, but something much older than that.
I would say some of them are, some of them aren't. There's certain things in this world, on this land, that are ancient. And when I say that, I would say the Waduksti, which is like um, ancient. You go back to the stone people, the star people, and those are ancient. Ones that were too holy or sacred to come to this earth, but stretched to this earth. And then you have the ancient beings that are in different realms here on this earth. Like you would call them like a parallel universe. They can come in and out, such as our spiritual beings. Our ancestors that walk this earth. They can come in and out of this this realm. And then you have the animal powers, the ancient beings that are tied to the stars, and they're tied to different elements and colors. And those are the ones that are here on earth. Those are the ones that bring the medicine, the healing. They're here as well. And then you have our ancestors that walk this earth, that live this life, who were given special abilities from all these ancient beings. And then they too became spirits, and then they too can come back and help, in certain ways when called upon. So there's different levels of it, I guess you would say. It's just how to understand the way in order to call them or communicate with them, and ask them for help, because they're essentially they're helpers to help us in a time of need, and to help us in a time of healing, and in a time of war and peace. And so that's one of the teachings we have, within our, indigenous way of life.
Right. It seems to me that, from what I know, that the perspective of the Native American culture in terms of spiritual perspectives is very complex, and it's very true to what I guess it really is, existence really is, but they seem to have had a keen perspective on it, whereas it wasn't isolated to just this like one God. It was more about the universe, the earth. And if you could explain that and how that works and how you learned that as a kid.
I would say within our native teachings, we have an understanding of probably every conspiracy theory that any person has seen on YouTube. For us, we understand who they are, where they come from, and how they're utilized. A lot of times people talk about, why is the government hiding all this information? Why aren't they releasing all this information? We want to know. We want to know. For the native belief and native understanding, we already have an understanding of that. A lot of that is secret knowledge. A lot of that is tied to secret ceremonial groups, or in other words, native secret societies, which are a beautiful thing because those ways are still carried on. Those ways are still practiced today. They're still passed on from generation to generation. We have understanding of the directions in the sky, and what comes from what comes from each direction, and what color they are, which is also important, and what medicine and animal they're tied to. And whenever you ask and you hear these native stories of supernatural or paranormal, they're very much real because these things actually have happened. These things have actually been witnessed. And most of the times they're only shared around small circles at a fire, out in the woods or out in the country or the Everglades or the desert or the hills. And we share these stories is because it's important to understand that just as much as our spirituality, healing, and beauty is real, there's also another world that is equally real, and that's that supernatural, that's that spiritual. And to give you a better understanding, I remember one time hearing a story from about one of my, I call him grandpa, and he told this story, and he went to a ceremony. He got invited to a ceremony from another medicine man. And these were elders at the time. They must have probably all been over 80. And this medicine man invited him. And he said, I want you to come to this ceremony. I want to show you something, and I want to share this with you. And so my adopted grandfather at the time went to that ceremony. And my adopted grandfather, he was also, a spiritual man, healed many people, many miracles. A lot of people went to him. And he went to this ceremony, and this other medicine man was there helping another medicine man who needed help. And this medicine man who needed help was really sick. Something had happened to him. And so he sought out this other medicine man, this healer, to help him. And when the healer was helping this other man, he said, do you believe that I can help you? And that man said, yes. Even though that man was a healer. And that man said, are you afraid? And that man said, no. He goes, are you afraid? He goes, no, I'm not. And then he asked him one more time. And then he showed him something. And when he showed him this man fell out, passed out. Because what he saw was too powerful for his eyes. And when he fell out, my adopted grandfather watched that. And as he was laying there on the ground, this medicine man said, watch how I heal this man. There's something in his mind. There's something in his mind that is really strong. And he can't let it go, but I'm going to help him. So that medicine man laid this other man down on his back, and they started singing. And that medicine man put his hand on his forehead and started singing. And his hand started to shake. And then my adopted grandfather said that medicine man, put his whole hand in that other man's head. And he couldn't believe it. And as that man's hand was in his head through his forehead, he pulled it out. And he pulled out these snakes that were in his head. And when he pulled those out, he took them, and he took those snakes and he got rid of them in that spiritual way of their people. And then they started to sing, and they used other instruments and started to do other things. And my adopted grandfather was like, wow, that's powerful. That's ancient. And that later, that man that sought help, he woke up. He woke up and he was better. And those are one of the stories that I was told that, are real today. That these things happen, and all for the purpose of healing. But what is healing? Healing is from the sickness, from the wickedness that is out there. Somebody did that to that person, and it happened for a certain reason. And that's a part of our way of life, knowing that these things are real. And no matter how supernatural or scary or bad things can be out there, there's always a remedy. There's always a healing. But healing is by asking for that help. So I wanted to share that story.
The healer reaching inside the man's head and pulling out the snakes, does that suggest that we're living in a multidimensional reality? And to witness something like that is you're witnessing, I guess, just a sliver of what our existence really is. Would you see it that way?
I would see that our existence today is definitely a back and forth between spiritual realms here on this time, and how you can witness that is through obviously your eyes and how you feel. But how are your eyes set? What do your eyes believe? Like, what is your mind feeding your eyes? Because your mind is powerful, but with our spirit leads the way before our mind. And that's why they say the longest journey anyone would ever travel on this earth is from their mind to their spirit until they find that. And so when you get to your spirit, you can understand how to heal all things. And so, we definitely are living in a time where these things are being shown to people. Their people, or just the average person is witnessing just a small sliver of that supernatural or that power. And that could be a good thing, but that also can be a bad thing, because there are other powers that want to conjure that power, conjure that energy, take that energy. Certain people are talking about quantum computers that are trying to reach into those realms and harness and capture that spiritual energy. And that's what they would always talk about a long time ago, is the battle between spirituality and technology. Technology wants the power of spirituality. And that's why they say a lot of these things are happening around the world.
I think a lot of people don't realize the consequence of how far tech would go to destroy us. There's little rumblings of it right now, and obviously it's been in science fiction. We were warned by these stories that were put into our minds, Do you feel that way? Do you feel like it's going in that direction? That it's killing the spirituality and might, in fact, have the potential to destroy permanently some people's spirit?
I feel like the people that necessarily aren't as strong could be affected the most. Those who don't have like a true connection to their spirit, or maybe have too much trauma in their mind or too much trauma within their genetic makeup passed down from generation to generation, that the battle is an uphill journey for them, and that they may be swaying or influenced more so towards, beings, entities through people to follow more of a darker or a path that may lead them astray. But then I also believe that there's a spiritual awakening amongst people all over, where people are realizing these things that are happening, things that we've talked about within spiritual circles, spiritual indigenous circles that are coming to pass. I don't believe that technology can become that powerful, only because of what I've seen in my visions and where they've taken me and what they've shown me spiritually. But it's still there, and it could almost equally be as powerful, because how technology is the spirituality for people. People wake up to technology. It can make your day or break your day by one post or what somebody says or what you see online. That's the power of technology. It has affected people's psyche, their emotion, slowly getting to chip away at their spirit. And that's the key. If it can chip away at their spirit, then it can harness that spiritual energy from people, because people's spiritual energy is constantly, and emotional energy is constantly going into their posts, into what they post online, or their emotions or their deep feelings or their hurts and pains. They're basically giving a map to AI. to mimic every emotion, from every human, to allow for AI or technology to mimic humanity so well that it can almost mimic spirituality, which is interesting.
Sure. And it seems like it's very real, but it seems like a sinister plot that we were warned of for almost 100 years of science fiction. Yeah.
Mm. In saying that, what I was told a long time ago, and they said when the little people disappear and when Bigfoot disappears, we have to be worried. And what they meant was that the little people, Bigfoot, these are beings within our Native American stories of mystery or supernatural. Some would say folklore. But when they disappear, we have to be worried because they're the caretakers of the land. They're the ones who protect the trees, the waters, the sacred places, the holy places. And it's interesting because there was a time years ago where there was a lot of sightings, of the little people. There were a lot of sightings of Bigfoot. And then there was a time where you didn't hear about them. You didn't hear about them. And so it's interesting because lately there's been more sightings of those two beings, which is real. And I often wondered, throughout my life, with my own personal experiences with those beings. And now it makes sense. It makes sense. I'm thankful that they're here. I'm thankful that they've been sighted. I'm thankful that I've seen them because it means we have time and we're in a time of deep spirituality, deep supernatural things that are manifesting, for all people.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
There are those who say that this quiet town holds many secrets. Legend has it that beneath this very tower, a dark force had its eyes set on the children.
We were told that what was going on there was for the benefit of humanity.
What would you say to the people who say, well, all these children were kidnapped and murdered and you were a part of it? What would you tell them?
I did approve of it, but there was nothing I could do about it.
They wanted a large number of programmed boys to be used for mind control operations.
And there are others who say it's still happening to this day.
I don't know, I for myself find it a little suspicious that all the evidence has been conveniently destroyed.
Let's put it this way. If you're sitting there with 20 guns pointed at you, what are you gonna do? Whatever the hell they want!
Watch Montauk Chronicles now for free on Tubi, Plex, Roku, and available for download on Amazon and Apple TV.
This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanations, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
You had mentioned that you saw the Sasquatch or Bigfoot. Can you tell me about that experience?
Some years back, we were out on our land, our Indian land that we have, family land. It was me, my son, and two of my cousins. And I wanted to take them out to the land so they could see it, walk around. Beautiful, beautiful, large field. Field is surrounded by these nice tree lines of a lot of blackjack, some oak, and just a beautiful place during that time of year. And it was about 5:30, in the early evening. And as we were walking, there was just a peaceful feeling that I remember feeling, really calm. And as we were making our way through the field, I took them to this certain area of the land. Now, mind you, this is about 390 acres, 380 acres of land that we have out there. And as we were walking to this one area, it's where the two tree lines meet. And so there's a little road that kind of cuts through. And I said, let's walk over here. I want to show you the other part of this land. And mind you, a lot of times some of my cousins, they'd be like, man, when you go out there, you got to make sure you take a gun because there's a lot of wild hogs and mountain lions. But that day, we didn't have anything and we were just cruising through, no worries, enjoying the beautiful day. And so as we got to that opening into the next field of land, I looked to my left and I heard this kind of splashing, crackling noise. And I said, what is that? And I looked, and right then, with my own eyes, I see this thing, and it hits the ground so hard. And I remember hearing this splash. And then all of a sudden I looked, and my heart just dropped. Because I thought, oh no, what is that? This thing was huge. And it must have been maybe, I would say, 50 feet, maybe 60 feet from me in the trees. And from the tree line to where it was maybe 25 feet. And I look at this thing and it gets up and its body was so massive. And right then it just takes off. It was almost what's strange about it, it was like we snuck up on it. And I thought, how are we able to sneak up on this thing so close and we're talking? You can't even sneak up on a deer like that in the woods when you're actually having full conversations. So this thing got up and I remember I saw the back of it. And it was like a burnt orange. And you could see hair on it. And this thing took off. And all of a sudden my son stopped, my cousin stopped. And I remember whenever it took off, it was gone in about 5 steps. But the interesting part about it was whenever it was running, the only way I can explain to the way it felt, when it ran, it sounded like this. And it was gone. But whenever each step hit the ground, it reminded me of like when you're in a weight room and you drop like a 50-pound dumbbell on the ground, but more than that. But the interesting thing about it was the noise that it made. And I asked my cousins, my uncles, who are always out in the woods, if they've ever heard this before, even other hunters, and none of them have ever heard this noise made by anything that massive. And the noise that it made as it was running, it goes, bark, 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 bark. And I thought, in my head, the first thought was, is that a giant chicken? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's what it sounded like.
Yeah, it sounded like a giant chicken. And I was like, what the hell is making that noise, running that fast and that massive? But it's interesting because, we've heard stories, and I've also seen videos, that the Bigfoot, Pita Dudus, can mimic voices, can mimic human voices, animal voices. And that was the only thing that made sense whenever it made that noise. But this thing was huge. This thing was massive. And honestly, I couldn't believe that I was actually witnessing it, with my own eyes. I've had friends, that I visited with that had told me their stories where they saw Bigfoot with their own eyes. And I always thought, man, that's amazing. But the interesting part about it was whenever we saw this together, because we all witnessed it together, all 4 of us, was that, like, this is real. This is real. And the thing just was gone like that. And like it just vanished. Like it just ran 5 steps, massive steps, and was gone. And that's the pretty remarkable thing about it. Like, to be able to see that. But I thought about it and I'm like, man, there's something special about this land. And there's something special about certain places on the land that we know about, where they are, and certain beings are around those locations. And so that was whenever we saw that together. And that wasn't the only time that we've had an experience in that area, but that was the one time where I was able to witness one that close in the middle of the day.
What was the perspective of you growing up from your family and from people around you at that time, as opposed to the one where, I mean, I think it's somewhat similar because you're seeing this thing and it's out in the shadows, but wasn't it part of the culture?
Yeah, these things are all a part of the culture. They're normalized within the culture. But the thing about it is, no matter how normalized it is, when you experience it and you see it, it's almost like you're seeing it for the first time. Like, I've seen so many things in my life, spiritual, supernatural things that I've witnessed with my own eyes, that every time I witness something, it's almost like I'm seeing it for the first time. And I think that's the teaching in it. It just reminds us how powerful and how supernatural and beautiful this world is, and how scary it can be, to keep you on your toes, to keep you ready, And so for me, I could see something tonight. I could have a vision tonight, tomorrow. And it could be equally as powerful as one that I had, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so that's the exciting part about the supernatural, that it keeps you alert. It keeps you reminded that there is a place that we live here on this earth, and then there's another place that is equally powerful and equally present on this earth as well. And to get a glimpse of that each time is remarkable.
Back in your childhood, what was the most profound supernatural experience that you had before even seeing the Bigfoot or anything else? What was it that, because I'm sure you had heard stories first, right? What was it that, followed by the stories that you heard from family members, that really charged this perspective and opened your mind to that world?
Me personally, I've when I was a child, even later on in life, seen and experienced a lot of things that were all very profound and powerful, like equally. I could probably go down the line and tell you so many stories, but I guess maybe probably the earliest one, that I remember, when I was maybe probably 3 years old. I remember I was asleep, and my mom and dad, they were both sleeping on each side of me. And I remember that night, I couldn't sleep that night. And I can't remember what side my mom or my dad was on next to me, but I remember I kicked the covers off. And I think I had to have been probably 3 years old, because I've dated it back to when I remember this happened. And I remember I couldn't sleep. It was hot. But I remember always hearing stories about the house that we were sleeping in. It was an old house, but it was built on top of an older house. And in that particular room that I was in, I remember hearing stories about it. And I remember there being like these old toys that were in the closet. And the closet was at the end of the bed. But that night, I remember specifically feeling like something was like watching me. You hear it all the time. Something was watching me. I felt eyes on me. So I remember I was hot and I couldn't sleep. And I remember I turned, and I remember I was laying there. And all of a sudden I heard something, like at the end of the bed, kind of coming from the closet. And right then I don't really recall if it were hands, but I felt like a force, something like grabbed or was around my ankles. And it felt like 2 forces around my ankles, and literally just pulled me to the end of the bed. Clear as day, I remember this. Pulled me to the end of the bed fast. And I just slide off the bed like, and I go flying into the closet. I remember I landed in the closet on top of the toys. And when I hit the toys, it made this loud noise. And I remember when I hit the toys, I just kicked. I was kicking. And I pushed my body from the closet wall back to the edge of the bottom of the bed. And I was screaming, like, ah! Started screaming for my mom. My mom jumped up. My dad jumped up. She was like, what's wrong? What happened? What are you doing? What are you doing? And I was just right there at the end of the bed, like, crying. My mom grabbed me, picked me up, put me back on the bed. And I remember that, I remember something literally grabbed my ankles and just pulled me all the way into the closet. And clear as day, I would say that was probably the first time that, something, came through and tried to, take me. Wherever they were trying to take me, it was somewhere else, beyond that closet door. And I remember it clear as day. And that was probably the first time that I was actually, I would say, bothered, or attacked by, something that may have been sinister. And that's probably the earliest one that I remember in regards to something reaching out and grabbing me.
I think you had a shared experience with some other people. I've had a few people along the way tell me a very similar experience of something trying to drag them to another place in the bedroom when they were kids. And what do you think that was?
After years of thinking about it, I don't know if it was maybe an old spirit ghost, of the family that was trying to scare me, or, if it was something that was trying to take me, take me somewhere else. And but because we have stories of there's these certain beings that try to take kids, off into the woods, in the middle of the night. And a lot of times those kids they don't return for a few days, or they'll find those kids, sitting on a log in the middle of the woods, dazed and confused. So I don't, I'm not really sure, I'm not really sure, but I do know whatever it was, it wasn't a soft little gentle tug. It was like, a very aggressive, like I went flying off the bed. And I'm not really sure. Whatever it did, it wasn't meant to comfort me, but it was meant to like really, scare me, and it did. So whether or not they were trying to take me into some hole in the closet, I don't know. But all I know is I started kicking, screaming.
The stories of beings taking people into the woods, now you heard those as a kid, and those are indigenous. That's part of the indigenous tales, right?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, the stories about these beings, we call them Stilabuchkaji. They take the kids out in the woods when they're young. And they always say whenever you go to like a native function, stay close to the house, stay close to the dance, the ceremonial grounds, stay close to the campsite. Don't go to the tree lines. Don't go too far out, because those things they're drawn to the energy of those ceremonies, dances, or events or gatherings. But they sometimes can only come so far, to the tree line. But there are stories, where certain kids, would go out and play. And these beings that would come, they look like children. So those kids would think that they were playing with children. And those beings would just kind of lure them off into the woods. And they sometimes those kids would, become missing, for a few days. They would always return, but they would become missing for a few days. And they say those beings would take them out and, take them to their villages, which I believe, are in parallel universes, parallel realms. And those beings would teach those children, abilities, gifts. Or sometimes those kids would come back and they wouldn't be all there in the head. They would be, kind of lost, or sick. And so, those are some of the stories that we've heard. They're very much true. They very much have been witnessed and seen. We've all seen them. We've all seen these beings, they come out of the trees, they come out of the woods, they play, they sound like kids, they come around certain energies. Um, and it's very interesting. Everything is about energy. Everything is about what is happening, what kind of energy is around. And so, I find it interesting how these things are tied to that, but it's very much real. I myself have witnessed it, and I have friends that have witnessed it, family members that have witnessed it. And, these are things that are ancient. They've been here thousands and thousands of years, and they're still here. And that's the exciting part, is that we actually get to see those things and have glimpses of those things in real time. And that's the beauty of our supernatural.
Do you believe a lot of these sightings and occurrences and experiences can be matched to perhaps some of the mysterious nature of people going missing in national parks and places like that they seem to just have vanished? There've been accounts that are just, you can't explain. It wasn't an animal, and they don't suspect it was a person, but people are literally vanishing into thin air. Do you think some of this folklore can lend to an explanation?
I've seen some really interesting documentaries about how people have gone missing in certain places. I believe that I'm not sure. Some people have vanished. Some people, I don't know who those people were. So I wonder about that. I wonder if there's certain places that they're being taken to, if they're even on this earth anymore. It's interesting. That right there is a mystery to me as well. Like, where are they going? Where did they go? Did something come from a deeper realm and pull them down? Did something come from deep space and take them up?
Yeah, it's some of those things that where a lot of search and rescue and people like that have ruled out. Um, they try to rule out as much as possible before they look into the supernatural. And but it seems like the native cultures have had explanations for people that have gone missing, like the one you just talked about previous. Um,
Yeah, we have old stories, where somebody would disappear. Like in some of our old stories, they would be gone for years, like gone for years. And they would come back and they would tell stories about where they went. And most of the time they went deep into the earth.
in the culture, is there a perspective that there's another world? When you say deep into the earth, it's like this almost a parallel universe, like you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, like in the old stories, the earth would open. The earth would open, and they would go into these places. Um, and it's interesting because there's a lot of shows that talk about like the earth opening or something like that. I can't remember what I heard, but I thought that's interesting because that's an old story that we have. Some would call it a cave. It opens and then it closes, but it's a cave. It's translated into a cave in English, but a cave just doesn't disappear. So it's got to be more of like a doorway that opens that resembles it.
Sure, if any culture has a perspective on these things, because I don't believe these things have just popped up in recent years, even though it's a lot of talk and it's very popular to talk about it in the supernatural interest communities. Or anyone that, any popular show or whatever. But I think these things do stem back into much more ancient ideas and perspectives. And I think a lot of that I wanted to discuss with you today, because I know that you have such a wealth of stories and history, um, especially about people who live in the forest and in the mountains way back. And these stories date so far back that they've been carried on. And you continue to tell these stories, correct?
Yeah, I think some things that are very similar is, you have a lot of people I guess, in modern day secret societies here in America that, you know, have rituals, with an owl, the bird. Um, People have seen it, heard it in regards to places like, Bohemian Grove. It's like a conspiracy theory they talk about. But what I found interesting about it is how they use or mimic the power of that owl, the bird. And that's a power and energy that we know. Like we have a direct connection to it within our spiritual way, in our teachings. And the other thing that's interesting is how a lot of people talk about like the reptilian people, and that's something that is also within our teachings. And these things are ancient, old powers, that are here in this time. And I think what makes it different, in regards to our beliefs is our connection to the spirituality. And what that means is our connection to the spirit of that owl or the spirit or energy of that reptile and what it means and how it is utilized and how there's an understanding, a protocol that we have with each other, as opposed to us trying to conjure the power, take the power, control the power, or own the power. We just allow the power to be what it is and to be utilized for what it's meant to be utilized for. And that's why I feel like a lot of things are out of balance in the world, because people want to control, they want to own these powers, which cause more dark, sinister energy to move about this earth. And that's the interesting thing about our indigenous way of life, is it all comes back to the spirituality, to the supernatural belief that all these things are here and are there for us to call upon. But above all that is the higher power, Dedawahat, Ibo Funga, Hezagi de Mizi, the creator, the one creator that created all things. Under that, the star people. Under that, all the other beings, that are a part of the parallel universe, you could say, here on this earth.
Again, if you look back in fable or even cinema, or it goes way back, that idea of the same power being used by two different types of people or perspectives. One is eventually obliterated by it, but the others respect it. Mm-hmm. So it helps, or at least it doesn't destroy them. It's that kind of concept that I think can be applied to the way the world is in different places throughout history, right?
Exactly. And these things come back. They come back in visions. They come back in supernatural visitations. For me, they come back. They'll come back and they'll show me things. The spiritual beings will show me things. I assume there's a lot of people out there that have that ability, only because I've had it in my whole life. Not something I flaunt or anything like that, but just something that just is, to have that spiritual insight. Even before COVID, they'll come and they'll tell you what's going to happen, where it comes from, what's it going to do to the world, and so, everything makes sense when you walk in that spiritual way, but walking in that spiritual way is you have to stay balanced, because there's that dark side too, which can be scary, to some people, and they can't handle it. And that's the part that separates, the spirit from the mind. So that's why we strive to move by our spirit.
If you were to offer a kind of a road to, or the rules to healing in a way, parameters to stay within, and sure, because I'm, this is something that's much more complicated and would lend more time to, but what would you tell people who are feeling lost in this time right now?
I feel like right now, in life, I don't want to be too philosophical, because there's so much going on in the world. I know a lot of people probably out there feel lost, but one thing that I know about the supernatural is that it's exciting. It's real. These things are happening in real time. Before, these were stories that we shared around the fire, sightings, deer woman, Bigfoot, tall man, little people, and all the other tribes that have all their scary stories that are scary, that are real, ghosts, spirits, things that are in people's houses, shape-shifting, bad medicine, witchcraft, all these things are there to tell a story. about humanity, to find a balance, and I think these days the people in the world are trying to find a balance, confused about the battles they're facing in their mind, confused about the spiritual battles they're facing in their lives or around them, but they always say, and this is something that's ancient, is the key is spirituality. Finding that connection to Mother Earth, finding that connection to the animal powers, not in a hobbyist way, not in, a way that is appropriating or trying to conjure or own that power, but just to be one with that power. And they say whenever you become one with that power, man, you'll be blessed with more gifts, more visions, more understanding, but only, they say, with a humble spirit or a humble heart. But one thing that I love is telling these scary stories, and I could tell many more, about that journey. But this part, I just want to explain the basis of it, and that's that spirituality and supernatural.
And I appreciate that. It just makes a lot of sense to me. It's how you approach it. It's what the spirit within you, and in depending on your perspective and your touch to it, is how the outcome is going to be. At least that's what I'm getting from it, and it makes sense. In regard to some of the stories, what are you mentioned the scary stories? Tell me, I mean, what are some of the scariest ones you've heard or even experienced?
I would say one of the bothersome things that I've had to experience in my life were, going to haunted places and being able to see all the people that have been murdered in those places or killed, to be able to see the playback of everything that's happened at a location, and to be staying in those haunted places and those ghosts to come, and show themselves to me. I would say early on that was something that was just, kind of bothered me, because it would not allow me to sleep. But as I got older, I was able to navigate that. I was to control that a little bit more, to where it wouldn't be so bothersome. And I would say that those are some of the things that I was able to see and experience. The other things are being able to see shapeshifters, in my life, actually be able to witness that, and witness even, the bad medicine, the witchcraft, people trying to do bad medicine or trying to do witchcraft, and understanding what that is and understanding how to take care of that. Going to, I guess you could call it, outer space. Some people say they were abducted. I don't say that. As natives, we don't say that. We're taken to those places deep in the stars, and being able to go places and visit with certain beings and have conversations, of spiritual understanding.
There's so much I want to ask you. So can you take us as an audience, because this is an audible experience, and just because I know you're a storyteller partially in your world and what you do, can you tell us those stories in detail, at least one of those experiences?
Yeah, sure. I'll tell this one story. And this story is an example of I guess, my journey of being able to be a dreamer, they call it, adahichidis, to be able to travel and go certain places, whether it's in the earth, under the waters, into other spiritual realms, or to travel here on this earth. But the one I'll share is about being able to go, deep into space, way out there. Like, what is way out there? What is it like? And I remember one time they came to me, and how they communicate is these ones communicate high up, and they have a certain tone. I'm not going to share the tone of how they sound, but they have a certain tone and a certain way that they talk. And so when they come around, these certain ones are very powerful. Their power is the power that makes you cry. They're that powerful. And so when they took me up this one time, they asked me, they said, we need you to come to this place. So I said, okay. And they took me, and of course it's like traveling through space. You see stars, different colors, beautiful colors, and you're just going way, way, way out. And they showed me a certain place I was going, and so I went there, and I landed on, I guess you would call it a star, but it was a different kind of star because there was a doorway into the star. And I went into the star, and there was this room, a big room, and I stood there, and there were two people in there. I won't say who they were or what they were or where they're from, but that's the details they tell you. They'll tell you all these details, but I'll say there was just two people in there. And we had a conversation, and they shared things with me. And then the doorway opened, and when we looked out, we could see another planet. And in this place we were at in the stars, we could see the planet in front of us, and it was a certain color as well, and it had a certain shape, and there were certain things on it. But instead of there being blackness around the planets when we were looking out of this star, it was all, this is what I will share, it was all static. Like when you look at a TV screen, it's that static, the old static. All around it was all static. So as far as you could look, it was all static around us. And that is a place that probably comes from a certain energy or power. And so as these two beings were talking to me on this star-like planet in this room, they finished sharing with me what they wanted to share with me. And then they jumped out. And when they jumped out, they just jumped into the static of space and just vanished into the static. And after that, I believe I jumped out, but when I jumped out, I came out and I woke up. I woke up. And these are the dreams that I have. These are the visions that I have. These are the visions that I've had ever since I was a kid. It's always been like this in how I dream and how I see. And there's many other places that I've been and seen, I believe to be really powerful and ancient places. Growing up, I always thought that this is how everybody dreamed, but I found out later it's not. And so I cherish these dreams because I know that they come from my bloodline on my mother and father's side, coming from spiritual, powerful healers of medicine men and medicine women, chiefs, hereditary chiefs from an ancient bloodline, from our ancient village. And so I hold that close to me. And that's why I feel that has been able to be passed down to me, passed down to my son, and it will continue to be passed down as it is within my family. And that's the beauty of being able to have that spiritual connection, not just to the star powers, but to the powers here on this earth, and to help in any way that I can, to guide people in a way if they seek that help, or whatever it may be. These are what gifts are for. They're not for us to control or to own. They're for the people. They just move through us. They just move through us in a clear path that we make here on this journey. And that clear path is healing. That clear path is living life and finding beauty in life and striving to live a beautiful life. I hope.
Do you feel that a lot of people are closed in this current time? This is kind of a poisonous time or a heavy time?
I feel like people are closed because of what technology is doing to the people. Technology is closing them off to their true peace and opening them up to their deepest level of mind power, and getting to people to operate out of their mind, and that's the battle. That's the battle. People are struggling, but that's the battle between spirituality and technology. It's real.
Even though there might not be a simple fix, what is something that you could lend to everyone right now? Because obviously they can't get your full teachings from this, but just to break away from it, to remind themselves that they are not a computer or a cell phone.
I would say some people are haunted people. They're haunted with trauma. They're haunted with past relationships, haunted with poltergeists of energy that they haven't let go of. And so anywhere they go, they're going to attract that negative energy. They're going to attract all the energy that they have yet to let go of. And technology is a part of that pain. Even though technology can be utilized in a positive way, it's utilized in a wicked way. Because technology can only work by the use of the rare metals that are in it. And those rare metals come from the earth. So in order for people to connect to the earth, they have to connect to the power of the earth, that earth energy, and change their thoughts, change their minds to put more positivity out in the world. Because, sometimes we're living in a more darker, sinister world than we are a positive spiritual world. But that's just the balance that people have to find. Where I find mine is through ceremony, sweat lodge, using our sacred instruments to communicate with the ancestors and the spiritual powers, to Creator, and to give thanks and to stay in that energy, using these medicines, these herbs, and these prayers and songs. And I would say, for people to find that, you have to find that somewhere. And the only way I believe you can find that is in Mother Earth. If you have nowhere to turn, go to Mother Earth. Mother Earth is ancient. Go to the water, the plants, the animals, the trees, the grass. Make that connection with those spiritual powers. Don't take the connection. Make the connection. These supernatural stories, these old Indian ghost stories are so real. So real. In every form of our gifts, every form of my gifts, there were times when I was doing a hip-hop show. I was performing on the Standing Rock Indian Reservation. And there was a lot of supernatural, paranormal things happening, at that time on that reservation. And I remember during my show, even doing hip-hop, in the spirit of which I was doing hip-hop, that good vibe, there was a paranormal thing that happened. Some ghosts that showed up to the show. And these ghosts that showed up to the show scared some of the crowd. And that's the power of that energy. The energy is all around us no matter what we do. But when we operate out of our gifts and we utilize our voices and that energy and that power, we draw that energy. And when that energy comes, because there's doorways open, you have to be ready. Always be ready. That's spirituality within our indigenous ways.
When you leave this physical body, what will you take with you?
I feel when I leave this physical body, I'll take with me that love. That love, because that love is what's going to connect us back to this world. That peace and that love. That's when we can come back and be spiritual helpers, just like our ancestors. They had a love for us, and that love would allow them to come back through the doorways. And that's how they come back, because their love for us, because they were here once. And now through that memory, they can come back. Man, I really enjoyed this, I feel like we just touched the tip of the iceberg in regards to, these stories, but I wanted to give more of a perspective on where these stories come from. We could sit here all night and just tell ghost story after ghost story, which is also fun. And maybe we can do this on another episode, talk about specific, ghost stories and things that have happened, which is also exciting. So I'm really thankful, Christopher, for allowing me to be on this show, Off to the Witch. Off to the witch, off the wall, the reality of the supernatural that we live in here in this world. And so I'm thankful, and thankful to be here. And I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. But before I get out of here, I'm going to share this song, this closing song, so that I can close up my part, of being here, and everything will be Durahe, Hindi Mahi, Data Chikstahu, Mado. Wahado tada, wahado tada, open it adakatado, open it adakatado, wahado tada, wahado tada, wahawatakano, wahawatakano, chekso sawedatakano, Chekso aweratacado, pupere nadakatado, pupere nadakatado, yo. Mado, Dudohe.
to Off to the Witch. I'm your host, Christopher Garetano, and I want to thank you for joining the conversation tonight. For many of you who may have lost touch with your spiritual connection and are either absorbed by technology or consumed by evil, I urge you to seek refuge and healing in the perspectives that Marcus suggested tonight. The dark side is certainly fun to observe and study, but be careful not to get too close to the edge. Until next time, try to enjoy the daylight.